Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff, Mosher, and Adam Caplan here. We've got a great Inside the Birds lined up for you. We're obviously going to bring back Greg Cosell one last time to complete our 4-part podcast series by breaking down the one and only Philadelphia Eagles. I know Greg will have some really interesting stuff to say about Carson Wentz, the new receivers, the defensive additions. It's going to be a very comprehensive breakdown. Look forward to getting into that. Real quick, normally you get used to Adam and I giving you a few nuggets before we get into some other stuff. We're going to save that, including the Dallas Goedert incident in which he was sucker punched. We'll have more on that and some other news surrounding the Eagles later this week when we drop our Thursday edition podcast. So look out for information. Then we're going to stick to just breaking down the Eagles and ending this 4-part NFC East preview series in this episode. So if you've missed any of our other NFC East previews with Greg Cosell, whether it's the Giants or Washington or Dallas, you will be able to catch that on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page. They're all loaded up on YouTube. So go to Inside the Birds on YouTube and you can check it out there. Please become a subscriber if you do. All right, before we get to Greg Cosell and his breakdown, I want to let you know sports are coming back, but casino games never left. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has an endless amount of casino games to play, all from the comfort and safety of your own home. And right now, first-time casino players on DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino can play risk-free up to $200 for their first 24 hours of casino play. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and find the casino games in the top navigation bar to start playing. If you want options, you've got slots, blackjack, roulette, table games with live dealers, and more. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino is a legal, safe, and secure gaming app. You can deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Plus, DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has new promotions every day, so be sure to check the app daily. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app now and use the promo code ITB to play up to $200 of casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, in partnership with Hollywood Casino and Penn National Racecourse. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, for the final time in this 4-part podcast series, we bring back Greg Cosell from NFL Film, senior producer and host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. We've asked him about Washington. We've asked him about New York. We've asked him about Dallas. So now it is the much anticipated breakdown of the Philadelphia Eagles. Greg, welcome back. And again, thank you for all the time you've given us during this 4-part podcast series.
Oh, guys, it's been fun. Enjoy talking with you.
You are now on the payroll.
Well, we all
like money.
That.
We all like money.
That,
you had to bring that up. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, the Eagles have made a lot of changes. Maybe not so much as the rest of the teams in their division, but they've certainly brought in a lot of new players and, great expectations for them coming off another division title. So I think we should start not just with the offense, but of course the offensive line in, with the recent news that Brandon Brooks is going to most likely miss the regular season with an Achilles tear. I mean, what a terrible loss for this team, because that's really the strength of their team, and he was such a good player.
Well, you could argue the right side of their offensive line was as good as any in the league. Couldn't you say that, Adam, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks?
Yeah, in fact, Greg, well, you and I know a personnel guy from the NFC who told me this week that Brandon Brooks was the best guard he evaluated on tape last season. The guys from the pro side.
Yeah.
And he explained to me, he broke down what he saw. And when you lose, and I know it's a guard, but look, the bottom line is he's a great football player. So, Greg, right now, Matt Pryor would be the start if the season started today. We know it's not, and they're probably going to add somebody. But you got to, based on Matt Pryor's limited play, what did you see from him last season?
Again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's Brandon Brooks, but I thought Matt Pryor acquitted himself rather well. I'm sure you've probably talked to people.
Yeah.
I think they probably feel pretty good about. I mean, I don't know if you've talked to people since the Brooks situation. Unfortunately, happened earlier. But I thought watching Matt Pryor on tape, I think he can line up and play in the NFL. As I said, he won't be Brandon Brooks. But I don't think it will be a weakness. The big issue becomes the ability to work together with Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce, because that's so much of offensive line is cohesion and coordination, working together. And obviously, Brandon Brooks, he's been here for, was it 3 years, for whatever it's been enough time where has a good feel with Kelce, on his left and Lane Johnson on his right to really work together. And that takes a little bit of time.
I want to circle back to Brandon Brooks because Adam, and I want you to chime in on this too, because I don't know that the common fan can tell what makes a guard great as opposed to a tackle who gets a lot more coverage and media attention, and then a quarterback or something like that. But can you guys both talk about what it is that you feel, whether you hear or Greg, what you see that makes Brandon Brooks an elite guard?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not an expert on that. I mean, offensive line play, I watch tape all the time. I love watching tape. I'll be the first to admit that offensive line play, and particularly interior offensive line play, is not necessarily, my area of expertise. I mean, I've talked to guys. I'm actually going to pull up some notes because I spent time talking to a guy I respect as an offensive line guy, and I'm just trying to see some of the things he threw out, because I thought that was really interesting. It was stuff here, like critical factors. And I guess this works for most offensive linemen. So you have play strength, functional strength, mobility and bend. Can you drop your pads? Overcoming force with force, both laterally and vertically. Play speed and quickness. Mental processing and what they call spatial awareness. In other words, being able to handle stunts and twists and movement along those lines. Understanding the player you're going up against, competitive toughness. I think that's really important inside. On the outside, we like to look at athleticism and think of guys as dancing bears. Do they have really light feet? That's wonderful on the inside if you have it, but I think on the inside, toughness and battling is probably more important than being a dancing bear. And then you get hand usage, and that's something you have to study really closely. Because that's a coaching thing. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm a true expert on that, but you talk to any offensive line coach or watch them teach, and it's all about placing your hands. And so that's critical.
Yeah, I would add this. This is the best comment I got Brandon Brooks. This tells you, this is how you really evaluate a lineman. How much is he on the ground? Rarely is he thrown to the ground or beaten. This is probably one of Howie Roseman's best free agent signings, Greg. Remember, he left Houston. Houston didn't want him back. They paid him a pretty good price. Brandon had some challenges, as we know, with anxiety. He was very public about it. He when you talk about technique and performance and being a great football player, he's like the epitome of that.
Yeah.
And it's tough, man. We don't talk about the guard position a lot, Greg and Geoff, but this guy is one of the best in the National Football League at his job. And we remember Steve Hutchinson. Steve Hutchinson is he in the Hall of Fame? Or I know
he made the Hall, yes.
When you're the best at your position, and I know Pro Football Focus is very high on him, Brandon Brooks. Everybody knows it. Everyone in the National Football League knows that Brandon Brooks is special. And Geoff, to put a bow on this, when you lose a special football player, it's very hard to overcome that.
Yeah.
But I like Greg's notes on Matt Pryor. Now, he didn't play very much, but Greg's putting a pretty good stamp on this guy. Only played a little, obviously only started one game, and then he took over for Brandon in the game against the Giants. Geoff, so that's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a small sample size, so I don't want to sit here and tell you that the guy's going to be great, no problem. Right. But I think he can handle himself. Okay. I think he can hold his own with a chance to improve. He's a big kid, and he moves pretty well.
6'7" and 340, 350. Wow.
Yeah, that does stand out how big he is. Obviously, the big question, Greg, is at left tackle. And as we sit here today, Andre Dillard is going to start there. He was their first-round pick 2 years ago. They traded up for him. We had Trey Thomas on with us a couple of weeks back, and he really talked about Andre and his need to really improve his hand technique. You were talking about use of hands being very important for all offensive linemen, especially offensive tackles, and dealing with those speed and power rushers. And Andre certainly has to kind of bridge that gap a little bit from his first year.
Well, and the other thing that he really needs to do is he needs to get stronger. His anchor needs to be better. He got pushed back far too many snaps by speed to power pass rushers. And some of that is hand usage. If you use your hands more effectively, because the last thing no matter how big you are, the last thing you want is a defensive pass rusher, edge rusher to get into your chest. If that happens, you could weigh 350 pounds and be really strong, and you're still going to be pushed back. So he needs to anchor better. He needs to, to use all the coaching terms. He needs to sink his hips, and he needs to be stronger. And that's the one area where I thought he needed to improve. Trey would certainly know more about the hand usage than I would, having played the position at a really high level in the NFL. But look, Dillard has really light feet. He's got quick feet. He looks the part, but he's going to have to get stronger, and he's going to have to battle more and play a little more competitively. Because at the end of the day, do you like guys to have light feet and be really athletic? Sure you do. But not every snap can you play that way. Sometimes you just have to battle, fight, and be competitive and block any way you can.
Greg, Carson Wentz is an interesting player. Geoff and I had outlined for people we spoke with that there were some issues with his mechanics last season that were undeniable from tape study. I had one guy tell me that something that did not get corrected, or at least he just didn't correct it, is his footwork sometimes was just off, and it caused the ball to sail. So from your tape study on Carson, what did you learn?
Well, he tends to fall away from a lot of throws, and that'll make the ball sail. And that's a lower body issue. That's theoretically coachable, but it has to be coached, and it has to then be taken to the field. Wentz is a fascinating guy because he is a really high-level talent. He's got a strong, powerful arm. He's got special traits, both his ability to throw from the pocket and make plays outside of structure. He's aggressive, turning it loose at times. We've seen that over the years, and I think that's in your DNA. I've talked to coaches about that, and most coaches believe that the willingness to make really stick throws is a DNA thing. You can't really coach that.
Wow.
I would say that his ball placement is erratic. He misses too many what we would call layups. You have to make those throws all the time. Literally 100% of the time. You got to make the layups.
Anything you see from that, Greg, real quick, on why he misses them?
That's hard to know. I mean, that's hard to know.
What with mechanics or anything? Anything you know?
I mean, I would say that his mechanics are up and down, but there are just throws you have to make. He misses a few of those, a few too many. I think he walks a fine line between pocket patience, which is good, and waiting too long, which is often not good. I think that's an experience thing. I think there's a fine line there. I think he also walks a fine line between throwing with precise timing and breaking down in the pocket. But when he breaks down, he can also make something happen. So that can be a positive. I think he needs to be a little quicker with what I call elimination and isolation. Most people like to call processing. We talked about his lower body mechanics, which definitely needs some work. He's got high-level second reaction ability, really high-level second reaction ability. Here's how I'd sort of sum up.
Could you explain that real quick, Greg? What second reaction means, so to let people understand.
The ability to leave the pocket and make plays outside of the structure of the designed play call. He's really good at that. I did an 8-game study of him. So here's how I wrapped up. I said, at this point in his career, Wentz is not a subtle, nuanced, disciplined craft style of quarterback, at least not consistently. Overall, he's much more of a playmaker type of quarterback, both throwing from the pocket and with his second reaction ability than he is a nuanced, subtle pocket passer, playing with precision snap after snap. You can see watching the tape that he's got a playmaking mindset and he wants to make throws down the field. And I think that's exactly why the Eagles, what they did this offseason. They were a slow offense last year in the last part of the season. That's not a controversial, bold statement. You just have to, see the players they lined up and watch the tape.
Everyone knows it. Yeah,
everyone knows that.
Not a secret. Not a secret. Right?
They know it. It's why they traded for Goodwin. It's why they drafted Rieger. It's why they drafted Hightower. They know it. So this is a team that needed to really up the speed explosion quotient in their offense because it fits the quarterback's mentality. Wentz came from North Dakota State where he played under center, the play action pass game, drive the ball down the field. That's what he wants to do. That's the way he wants to play.
I'm curious, Greg, because I'm pretty sure you have watched tape on Carson Wentz prior to this past year. And
I've watched.
Oh,
Of
yeah,
course,
he's
I've seen
watching
every
every
game.
snap.
You've studied him for a while. Is
Yeah.
what you saw this past year with the missing layups a little bit different than what you had seen from him in the past?
I would say he probably missed a few more this year than in previous years. Clearly in the Super Bowl season, he was unbelievable. I mean, that year he just made great throws. I thought he played at a really high level, both physically and mentally. I mean, I remember breaking down a play in the matchup show where he threw a touchdown. Was it to Torrey Smith maybe against the Cardinals? It was a long touchdown.
Oh, yeah. In stride.
I think that was Aguilar.
So it was Aguilar. Aguilar was
I think it was Smith. Yeah.
Okay.
Then it was,
on the crosser?
I was gonna say, I know he threw one to basket.
Post. It was a
deep post. Okay.
Got it. It was weak.
Yeah.
I don't know why I remember this, but I think
Who's the kid from North Carolina that they drafted out of Hollins? I think Hollins going too.
Yeah. But it was week 5. It was against the Cardinals. They ended up blowing him out.
Right.
And I just remember mentally and physically, that was as high level a quarterback play as you could see. And that was his second year in the league. So he's capable of playing at a really, really high level. I mean, I've had GMs in the league, and Adam, you talk to a lot of people as well. I've had GMs in the league tell me that Mahomes and Wentz are the 2 most talented quarterbacks in the league. So we'll see. I think this will be an interesting year for Carson. It's a shame there's been no off season because he's ideally going to be working with new receivers, and receivers who can run. And that takes, when you're trying to throw the ball 30, 40 yards down the field, you got to practice that. You just don't roll out of bed and do that. Yeah.
That's right. So, you mentioned Carson Wentz, and obviously he's a high level player. Well, I know the Eagles will tell you that when they drafted Miles Sanders, they have their next LaShawn McCoy. They think he's that special of a talent. What did you see from him from your tape study from last season?
Well, I'm sure you recall that I thought he was the second best running back prospect coming out behind Josh Jacobs. So I loved Miles Sanders coming out of college. So I'm not surprised. I think Sanders is a really complete back. The question is he a true foundation back in terms of number of carries per game? Although I don't think the Eagles are built that way anyway. So in other words, I don't think that they see Sanders the way, let's say, the Cowboys see and have used Zeke Elliott. I don't think the Eagles think about offense as we're going to start with Miles Sanders and make sure he gets his 20 carries a game. I don't think that's the way they see offense. So given how they see offense, he is a feature back. And I think he's got every trait you would look for. Plus, he's a really, really good receiver. They use him out of the backfield. They split him out. They run him on vertical routes. They run that route, which a lot of teams now run in the league, which is all go H seam, and H stands for halfback, and he's offset in the backfield as a halfback, and he runs that vertical seam route. He caught a touchdown against Minnesota this year with that. He caught some other big plays off that. He runs wheel routes, another vertical route. So he's a complete back. I think his pass protection has gotten better. So I really like Miles Sanders. The big question is utilization. How many touches is he going to get? And if you keep giving him touches, will that impact his efficiency? We don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah, Greg, I want to capitalize what you said on his ability to catch the ball in a vertical manner, which is something that I think you'd agree he did not have to showcase at Penn State. They just didn't throw the ball to him in that manner. I think everybody was surprised to see him make that kind of progress and have that kind of acumen when he wasn't able to show that in college.
Yeah, and again, a lot of times that's true with backs in college, so therefore people think they're not good receivers, and it's hard to know. There are backs every year who come out who don't necessarily get thrown the ball a ton based on their college offense, and so people then automatically assume they're not good receivers. We don't know that, but Sanders has proven to be a very good receiver, and he certainly is very good in space, so you like to get him the ball in space. The Eagles have a pretty multiple run game as well with their different concepts, so he's clearly their number one back.
Greg, so going forward here, you mentioned some of the receivers in passing here, and obviously they wanted to add speed. We all knew it. They did it. Just giving a bird's eye view of what you think this offense could be now with all these vertical guys.
Well, don't forget Deshaun Jackson's back too. I mean,
That's right.
So now they have a lot of speed, and speed changes the way defenses play you. That's the thing. because the last thing defensive coordinators want to do is give up explosive pass plays. The Cliff Notes version of the NFL to some extent for most teams now on offense is they're trying to create explosive plays. On a defense, you're trying to prevent explosive plays. I mean, that would be sort of the Cliff Notes version of what you're trying to do, because it's very hard, as we saw with the Eagles, and they did it well the final 4 games, but it's very hard to consistently go on long drives. It's just hard. And defensively, if you can make the other team run more and more plays, you feel better about the fact that they're not going to execute. The last thing you want to do is give up that 50-yard touchdown. So that's what the Cliff Notes version of the game is. So now the Eagles, think of this, and we don't know how it's going to play out. We just don't. But they've got Goodwin, they've got Jackson, they've got Rieger, they've got Hightower. 4 guys who are vertical dimensions. Now, they're not all going to be on the field at the same time, and we don't know. But all of a sudden, the defense now has to be concerned about getting beat over the top. And that changes how they play. And now they've got Ertz and Goddard. And I happen to love Goddard. In doing the 8-game study of Wentz, I chose to watch Goddard pretty carefully as well, because I've always liked him, even when he came out of college. And I think he could be a really, really good player. Now, he's on a team with Ertz, so the volume, for fantasy people might not be there. But I think Goddard is a really intriguing player. And in the last part of the season, he had some big games and made some big plays, as you guys recall. So now we're looking at a team that potentially has a lot of weapons, a lot of speed, with a quarterback with an aggressive mindset.
It sounds like, based on what you're telling us, that the upside of this offense, if the young receivers kind of know what they're doing and the coaches feel comfortable with them, with Sanders, with those 2 tight ends. I remember you telling me Dallas Goedert, you said he's a better athlete than Ertz. Am I correct about that?
He is a better athlete than Ertz.
Right. Yeah. So and Marquise Goodwin, who could flat out fly, a track star. So this offense, Greg, in terms of a vertical dimension, could be very, very interesting this season.
Yeah, and again, we don't know how it'll play out, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, man, they're going to be out of the block scoring 35 points a game, because we just don't know. And we don't know. Look, I watched the kid Hightower from Boise State. He needs to get stronger. That's the reason he's a 5th-round pick, because he needs to get stronger. And if you're not strong at all as a wideout, you're going to have a hard time in this league, because then you become limited in what you could do and how you can be utilized. But this kid can run. He can get over the top of defenses. At times he showed some route running savvy. So you see it on tape and there's something to work with. We know about Rieger, who I liked a lot on tape. And I know a lot of Eagles fans probably at the time were upset because they didn't take Justin Jefferson, but they're 2 totally different kinds of players. The Eagles didn't need Justin Jefferson. They needed Jalen Rieger, that style of player. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's a Hall of Famer, but his style is what the Eagles needed, because he's an explosive, twitchy athlete.
Greg, one last thing I wanted to ask you on the offense before we move to defense, and it goes back to the offensive line. In the last podcast we did breaking down Dallas, I asked you about how the Cowboys used to a lot of line games up front, twisting, stunting.
Yes.
And I asked you about that in particular because I felt like the Eagles last year struggled against those types of teams in particular, those that played a lot of games up front. And I'm wondering if you saw that at all consistently in your tape study with the Eagles, that they just struggled when teams threw a lot of stunts and twists at them.
It's really funny you say that. I'm glad you asked that, Geoff, because I take so many notes when I watch these guys. Obviously I'm sitting in my house, we're doing this, and I pull out my notes a lot, but I've got, 3 pages, 4 pages of notes on Carson Wentz in his 8 games. So I'm looking at other things as well. And I have to tell you, and again, to me, this is not a bold, controversial statement, but I didn't think the Eagles' O-line was particularly great in pass protection last year. And I know that there's this sense that, they've got a great O-line. But I think that the left tackle position was very up and down, even when Jason Peters was in the game. I think they struggled at times. And I think they struggled both with one-on-one protection, and I think they struggled at times with games, just like you mentioned. So I think that's an area that they have to play better. Obviously now they're going to have to replace Brandon Brooks, but even some of the guys who play, Sayamalu and Kelsey, I think they're going to have to play better consistently in pass protection.
Very interesting. So we'll go on to the defense. Adam, I'll let you start with the question. First, I just want to remind everybody to check out PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of the Eagles, the Sixers, the Phillies, the Flyers. They have great content. They have great podcasts. They are for the fans, by the fans. That's their motto. So check them out, phlsportsnation.com. And also, let's pause real quick for a word from our wonderful sponsors. All right, Adam, let's start it off with the defense. I know you were going to ask Greg something.
Yeah. You know, Greg, it's interesting. Their D line, their D tackle depth is really good, at least on paper. Really with Hargrave, right? With Hargrave, Cox, and Jackson missed just about the whole season. Or Hassan Ridgeway did very well in training camp before he got hurt. Anthony Rush had to play. I don't know if you know this, Greg. He was one of the most productive defensive linemen in last preseason in terms of rookies. He was really good. The Raiders probably should have kept him. The Eagles wound up picking him off their practice squad. So give us an idea. Not a lot of people, particularly the Eagle fans, know a lot about Javon Hargrave. What kind of player is this guy?
I love Javon Hargrave. I watched. He was a small school kid out of South Carolina State, and in Pittsburgh, everybody just assumes when you go to Pittsburgh, you're playing a two-gap system. You know, where you're hand fighting the center. They didn't. You know, most teams have moved away from playing a pure two-gap system. So he played a lot of gap. And he has much better quickness than people might think. He was a pass rusher in college, and I think he fits the Eagles system. I think he'll play that nose shade, that one technique, and he'll be able to rush the quarterback as well. But he is strong because he's got a really good build for an interior defensive lineman. I really thought that was a very, very good signing, you know, an under the radar type signing, because no one, you know, unless you're in the business and studying tape, you don't necessarily know who Javon Hargrave is.
Right.
But I think that was a really good signing of a young player coming off his first contract. So he still has a number of quality years left. And because Malik Jackson's later in his career coming off a major injury, and Malik Jackson will not likely be able to play 65 snaps a game.
What did you feel about Fletcher Cox's year last year?
Up and down. I think that he was still fighting injuries throughout the season, and I think that he had great moments because he is just incredibly gifted and talented, and at his best is a top 3 defensive tackle in the league. But I thought that he was a little bit up and down. D tackles, and we've probably talked about this before, D tackles are an interesting breed because stats don't mean a lot. You can watch a D tackle dominate a game and you'll look at the stat sheet and he has 1 tackle. So, but I thought he was a little up and down, but I think that Cox at his best, and ideally he's now healthy. You know, he is going into he's came in 2012. So, you know, he's over 30, but he still can be a really, really good player and a truly dominant player.
Greg, let's take a look at the secondary, because you've got a new DBs coach in Marquand Manuel. You've got more players and new players and guys changing positions. Jalen Mills is going to move. And then you've got Malcolm Jenkins is no longer there. So let's get started with his absence. How big of a loss is that for the Eagles, you think, based on your tape study?
He's a really good player, and I think he'll be a tough guy to replace. I know right now Jalen Mills is viewed as probably their starting strong safety, but I really am fascinated with Will Parks, the free agent signing from Denver. I watched a lot of Denver defense over the last number of years, and Parks in many ways played a Malcolm Jenkins type role in Denver. He played in multiple positions. He played in the box. He played deep. He matched up to tight ends. He did a lot of the things that Malcolm Jenkins did. Now, he's not at that level of player, but I think tactically and stylistically, he can be that kind of player. So again, we don't have a training camp. We don't have any on-field work. We don't know. But in some ways, I almost feel like Will Parks can better fit what the Eagles want from that strong safety position than Jalen Mills. I guess we'll find out.
We're also going to probably find out, unless they make moves, Greg, what Avonte Maddox is going to be like as an outside corner in this league. People like him. You know, Adam and I speak to people who've always liked his toughness, his instincts, and it seems like if you're only going to find a knock, it's that he's not 6 feet tall. He's well under that, and you have to match up against a lot of taller receivers.
Well, he was the boundary corner at the University of Pittsburgh. He played outside. He played to the boundary, which, of course, in college, the boundary is much smaller than it is in the NFL. So he came into the NFL as an outside corner. And people, because of his size, just like you said, Geoff, immediately felt like, oh, he can't play outside corner. Now, there have been examples of guys who've been his size who played on the outside and played well, the Brent Grimes of the world. It's been done. He's competitive. He's feisty. He's quick. He probably gets the first shot on the outside. I'm sure they would love Sidney Jones to really give him a battle and maybe even win the job, because
Correct.
Sidney Jones, before he tore his Achilles, looked like a really high-level prospect, and he's never really been that for the Eagles. He's had a few plays here and there, but Sidney Jones, without knowing what's going on in his head, because I can't know that, none of us can, Sidney Jones always looks to me like he's playing without a lot of confidence. And again, that's just an impression based on film study. But I think Maddox is a really tough, competitive, feisty outside corner. And I assume when you sign Darius Slay, you sign him because you do want him to match up to the opponent's best receiver. He's done that throughout much of his career. Now, Jim Schwartz has not necessarily done that with the Eagles, but that may be because he didn't have a guy he felt comfortable doing that.
Correct. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Greg. The latter, that's kind of my feeling, because I remember when they were involved with Jalen Ramsey, their plan was to, for the first time, actually match him up on the opponent's best receiver. Of course, they didn't get him. The Rams did. But the fact of the matter is, Darius Slay did play 1 year for Jim Schwartz in Detroit.
Yeah,
He knows the defense. He's in a better place now. They were losing a lot. He wanted to get his new contract, so the Eagles acquired him via trade. But if I'm an offense, especially Dallas, who we talked about in the last show, if I could protect, because the Eagles have a really good D line, I'm going after those corners, because other than Slay, Greg, I don't know if they have a quality corner starting opposite, because Maddox is talented, but he's not been consistent enough. And as you said, he hasn't been that outside corner since college.
Well, what the Eagles are counting on is their pass rush. I mean, Jim Schwartz ended up blitzing, a little more. Again, I don't have stats in front of me, so I don't know what the percentage was. And he'll blitz if he feels he needs to. But I think in an ideal world, he would love to be able to rush with 4. And in their mind, they've got a really good pass rush. They still got Barnett. They've got Graham, Cox, Hargrave, Malik Jackson, even Jannard Avery. We'll see how that plays out. But he's shown the ability at times to be a good sub-pass rusher who you can move around. So, Josh Sweat had some good snaps a year ago. So in an ideal world, I think they feel that they can up the quarterback's tempo with their pass rush. Look at Darius Slay. My guess is all the people that do the analytics numbers, whether it's Pro Football Focus or whoever, my guess is he got beat a lot last year. And one reason I think he got beat a lot last year is because he always matched up to the number 1, and the Detroit Lions had 0 pass rush. It's hard to play man-to-man for a long time. So the Eagles are counting on the fact that their pass rush will compensate and camouflage for some potential concerns in the secondary.
Well, Greg, we would love to bypass it, but we are contractually obligated to ask you about the linebacker position for the Philadelphia Eagles. Adam and I spend a lot of time laughing, and no disrespect to the Eagles linebackers, but it's clearly never going to be considered the strength of their team, and certainly not this year. But let's go through it. I mean, they've got a downhill guy in T.J. Edwards, who played a little bit last year, a cover guy in Nate Gary, and then we have to find out a little bit more about what Duke Riley can do and the kid they drafted in the 3rd round, Davion Taylor. But when you look at I guess we'll start with Edwards and Gary. I mean, does anything jump out at you, either positive or negative?
Well, Edwards will be a base Mike. I mean, he won't play in any sub.
Yep.
So he's a base Mike, and he's kind of your typical inside grinder, and that's what he is. Everybody knows what he is. I think he was an undrafted free agent. He's not overly athletic. He's a bit of a dinosaur in today's NFL. Not that he's a bad player, but teams don't play their base defense a whole lot, and normally the middle linebacker in your base, unless he's a special, the Luke Kuechly's of the world or the Deion Joneses of the world, normally the Mike is the guy who comes off the field, so Edwards is sort of your old school Mike. Now you get into what they're going to do in sub. It's interesting. Duke Riley was in between Deion Jones and Patrick Queen at LSU, as the guy who was the big time linebacker. He played 1 season as a starter at LSU, put up big time numbers just like Queen and Deion Jones. And, some thought he could come in the league and be an athletic guy, and it didn't work out. I guess the Eagles are now either a 2nd or 3rd team, but he's got some athleticism to him. We'll see how that plays out. Look, they drafted 2 linebackers. there's no question the kid from Colorado, Davion Taylor, he's a sub player all the way because he almost looks like a safety on tape. You watch his tape at Colorado. He played outside the box an awful lot. He was not really a stacked linebacker. He's purely a sub player at this point. If he were to get on the field a lot this year, if he showed up great in camp, he'd be playing in sub. That would be it. He's not going to play in base. And then Sean Bradley, to me, he's a stacked backer in your base right now. So he's a guy I thought was a notch below the athleticism that you'd like to have, which is why he's a 6th-round pick and not a 2nd-round pick. But he had a good feel in the box. He understood how to defeat blocks, take on blocks. He's a guy that could surprise. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he will or he won't. But if he ended up doing well and maybe earning playing time, I wouldn't be surprised.
Interesting. It's funny, guys. Sean Bradley was a guy that, talking to Temple people, he said he'll always be a great teammate, hard worker, a special teams guy.
Not the athlete you'd ideally want.
Right. And they never really, one of my best sources there said, look, we love him, but didn't think he would ever be a starter in the National Football League. Thought he'd make it as a special teams player.
And maybe he won't be. I'm saying, but because he knows how to play, he knows how to play stacked linebacker. Guys like that sometimes, look, I'm not going to compare him to Zach Thomas, and you all remember Zach Thomas, who was a 5th-round pick. But, at the time he came out, people said, well, he's too small. They said all the things he can't do.
Sure.
No question, Bradley is not a great athlete. If he was a much higher level athlete, like I said, he would have been a 2nd-round pick, but he's not.
Gotcha.
So we'll see. But I think he knows how to play stack linebacker.
Greg, do you like the Eagles as they, kind of, a month here from the start of camp, defending the division, already had some kind of adversity with losing Brandon Brooks, so some question marks there. But overall,
here's what I'll say, Geoff. We never know how guys you draft and sign will play, but I think they had a plan and they addressed their issues. Now, do they have some weaknesses? Yeah, we just spoke about one, linebacker.
Right.
Do they have some questions? Corner, for sure, besides Darius Slay. Although I think Nickel Roby-Coleman is a really solid slide corner. But I think on offense, they knew they had no speed. They addressed it. Whether everything works out, time will tell. All you can do is go through the process the right way. Then we see the results. Obviously it's a results business, but obviously when you see the results, then everybody's a genius too, because then they can just say, look at the results.
Having access to the results, yes.
Yeah, it makes everybody a genius. But I think they clearly had a plan going in, and they addressed what were clear concerns and issues.
Well, Greg, we've taken up a lot of your time, but we can't. Every second was worth it. So we really appreciate you breaking down not just the Eagles, but all 4 teams in the NFC East with us here on Inside the Birds. We appreciate that you put the effort in. I know our fans and listeners will love it, have loved it. They appreciate you coming on. And, Adam and I can't thank you enough for doing this 4-part series.
Thanks so much, man. It's awesome.
Well, I'll give you my account number in the Cayman Islands. And you can send
Cayman. I knew that about you. That's where your money comes from.
Is it the same bank Adam uses, Greg? Because then I can just make it easier.
Hey, one thing I want to add, Greg's scouting reports can be found at fantasypoints.com, correct? Is that correct,
yes.
Greg? Okay, so
and I'm just grinding away, watching tape.
Phenomenal, detailed like you cannot believe, folks. Can't get anywhere else. Go to fantasypoints.com and sign up. Get a subscription there because these reports, folks, it's like an encyclopedia. You got to do it.
Absolutely. I think they're the most thorough reports I've read. Yeah. They're amazing, Greg. So we really appreciate it. And look, I want to thank you again. Greg Cosell from NFL Films, the senior producer there, and also host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. Now, we're going to have you back, but we're going to give you a break here, Greg, because you put in a lot of time. But I please promise us that you'll come back on Inside the Birds sometimes down.
Well, we're just going to hope that there'll be a football season.
Yes.
And we can all get excited because we seem to be moving in that direction. But I'm just hoping because I'm really now that I've been sitting and watching tape every day, I'm just really excited.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for joining us, Greg. Greg Cosell, NFL Film senior producer, host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. Hope you guys have enjoyed every second of his breakdowns. All right. We also want to thank our friends at Manscaped for all your grooming needs. Go to manscaped.com and use promo code ITB for 20% off and free shipping on your Manscaped products. Trust me, folks, you have to have this. It's a steal. 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code ITB. We use it. It's great stuff. Go out and get yourself some wonderful lawnmower and other materials from Manscaped. All right, that's going to do it for Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. Big thanks, of course, to Greg Cosell, who helped us break down all 4 NFC East teams, including a thorough breakdown of the Eagles. And hopefully we'll have Greg back down the road. Thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads, and he's got a great podcast that he does with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Processed. So make sure you're checking that out too. And check out Hunter on Twitter at Broads81. And of course, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.